we're going to the US with two women that are members of the board of WDI USA. We have the president of, which is Elizabeth Chesak, and a member of the board, Karla Mantilla. They are going to tell us about their activism. Why did they choose to join WDI? Why radical feminism? And also they will inform us about the latest or the most pressing issues within the organization or the political situation there. So thank you very much for being here with us. Delighted to have you here, sisters. And over to you, Elizabeth and Karla. Thank you.
This summer, WDI USA had our board elections, and then Karla and I both joined the board on August 1st. So the other members are Lauren Levy, Catherine Kinney, Irene Lawrence, and Lorraine Nolan. So it's now a board of 6. And we just thought we'd pop by and introduce ourselves and talk about some of the things that our organization has been up to.
So yeah, I'm very new to working on the board of WDI, and it's been really interesting, and it's wonderful to be with such intellectually brilliant women who are doing so much work in the world. Just a bit about me. I came to feminism through volunteering in the battered women's movement in the mid-1980s, so a long time ago. But I came to radical feminism through that because I began to see that this violence against women, not as the way it's so often portrayed as a random acts of mentally ill men, but I began to see it as part of a system. It was a pattern, that male violence is a pattern, and that there's a reason for it. And it's not just, oh, those men are messed up psychologically or any other way. After I volunteered there, I ended up joining the Off Our Backs Collective, which was a wonderful experience. That was Radical Feminist, and I met amazing other radical feminists. That's a publication that began in 1970 and published for 38 years. I joined in 1993, and it was an amazing experience. But you know, print publications are tough to keep up. After that, I had to earn money, so I started working at an academic women's studies journal, that's where I kind of saw how terrible things had become for feminism and how women's studies had basically devolved until, to my view, it was more or less anti-feminist. And I've written and talked on that particular thing, the way that women's studies has devolved over time. I've also written a book on online harassment and the particular ways women are targeted in especially pernicious and pervasive features that affect women in dramatic ways. But the book is called Gender Trolling: How Misogyny Went Viral. So I joined WDI because of the good work that they're doing in the United States, obviously international as well, but the WDI USA. And I am really interested in how, they're putting radical feminism in action. And I'm excited to keep doing what I can. Before we went out of business, we made sure it's online. Mostly it's academic, scholarly work like EBSCO and places like that. I have a bunch of back issues in my house, but the paper copies are hard to come by. But yeah, it is online, but you have to probably have a academic access.
So I'm Elizabeth. I also recently joined the board of WDI USA, and I currently serve as president. I joined WDI last year as chief of staff and then applied for this role. So I found my way to radical feminism in 2019 when I was deprogramming from almost a decade spent in the gender cult. One of the things I studied in college was at my school called Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies, because there don't really seem to be women's studies programs anymore. But, even as I was very confused about, who am I even a woman, etc., I had a very keen interest in women's history, and that was the only way that I could study that, to be in that program. But it's just, looking back on it now, I see all the ways that that program was lacking. So when I found my way to radical feminism, not only did I find a critique of gender identity, I found critiques of pornography, prostitution, surrogacy, egg donation, etc., that I just didn't get from quote unquote liberal feminism. So that's really what drew me to it, and I just thought it spoke to issues that were really targeting young women, and that's an interest of mine, how to bring more young women into the movement and how to have an intergenerational exchange of ideas between the women who've been in the movement for decades and those of us who are coming to it more recently. We recently had our third annual national convention in Atlanta, Georgia, and this was September 20th through the 22nd. Our theme was amplifying the women's liberation movement, and we had a little over 80 women there, so it was fabulous. We talked about everything from fetal personhood laws, intergenerational discussion, sexism and gender ideology and progressive social movements, protecting women's sex-based rights as a Democrat in today's environment, just so many topics. Learned a lot, and it's just always so good to meet your sisters in real life, and it kind of sustains you through the rest of the year.
One other thing that was especially good was critiquing the DSM-5, a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And then there was some good panels by desisted women, and a Tumblr fan fiction and online subculture, and talking about trying to convince girls they're trans.
They will all be available online. And we're also already starting to think about where we might like to have our fourth annual convention. So, feel free to reach out to info@womensdeclaration-usa.com if you have a group of local women who might be interested. And then the other thing that was lovely was that there were no protesters. So it was a very quiet convention after just the insanity of San Francisco last year and the hundreds of people outside the hotel and some of them making their way inside the hotel. It was lovely to just have a convention where we're just focused on learning and networking and connecting with other women, and we didn't have to worry about anyone screaming their heads off outside. So that was lovely.
There's a lot of legal initiatives that are undertaken on behalf of WDSI. As you know, the United States, as well as many other countries, is overrun by laws that have just immediately, just kind of behind everyone's backs, been implemented, codifying gender identity. So we filed some cases too before the Supreme Court on the behalf of the states of Idaho and West Virginia, challenging the idea of female, or wanting to challenge erosion of female-only sports. There's also been and these are amicus briefs filed before the Supreme Court. That we've also filed some amicus briefs, which are just, kind of friend of the court, someone who's interested in the outcome of the case, who has something to say, and kind of the court will read this and hopefully use the information to weigh their decision. Another one based in the state of Wyoming, where a sorority was forced to admit a man. I don't know if you've read about that one, but and the lower courts upheld his being admitted. So we've filed an amicus brief in support of the female plaintiffs in that case. We've also joined us amicus brief about on behalf of the state of Indiana, where schools were not, the law was implemented where schools are not permitted to have single-sex bathrooms. And then also there's a amicus brief that was filed on behalf of a spa in the Washington state, where it was a women-only spa, and a man sued to be able to enter, saying his not being able to enter violated his human rights. There's also some ones that we're working on in the moment, so that upcoming briefs as well. There's more. I'm not going to list them all because that's a lot.
The oral arguments in that case will begin on November 18th in Seattle. So I'm going to have to be a little vague here. I'm sorry, but we are planning some things in Seattle. So if you're in the area in mid-November, please join us. We'd love to have you. So some other things that I wanted to highlight. It hasn't officially launched yet, but I got the go-ahead to mention it. We will have an anti-pornography group launching through WDI USA. So I'm super looking forward to that. I hope that will be a way to bring in younger women too, because the influence of porn among our generations is just so intense. And I know it's led many women to wake up from quote unquote liberal feminism and move toward a more radical analysis.
We've done some media events as well. We had a billboard truck in front of the Democratic National Committee featuring some of Kara Dansky's, some text from her, some quotes from her in an open letter to Kamala Harris. And then we also had a billboard put up around the time and in the area of the Republican National Convention saying that abortion is a women's sex-based right. So there's efforts happening on all fronts: legal, activism, public, letters to the editor, encouraging our state contacts to get involved in local initiatives on the ground there. So there's just a lot covered. We're trying to work on some events around November 1st as well. I mean, it's a bit of a conflict because it's right before the election in the United States, so the focus is not going to be on other things as much, but is it Chicago, Elizabeth, where they're going to be doing some activism around the self-ID in Germany?
Definitely Chicago, and we're trying to see if there's interest in DC, outside the German embassy in DC. So I've posted the link. There's a woman who goes by Triple L, and she is with LGBT Courage Coalition, I believe. And she interrupted Richard Levine's speech and asked him,
right,
why are you transing gay kids? I think there's still much work to be done, but I'm hopeful.